Hey there, Sajay. I, I see you talking, but I don't hear you talking. Makes you wonder if it's me and not you.
No, it's me,
Oh,
definitely.
there it is.
Thank you. Thanks for you wouldn't even know if people are listening if you talk sometimes. Thanks for I heard you had a talk for what's the security con, right?
I did get one. I need to go ahead and look and see who else got approved on that.
Nice.
It's talking about the working group output.
Very cool. Yeah. Maybe Jeremy from internally pointed out to that. It's pretty awesome. Good luck.
That was my backup talk. They didn't take my main one.
Oh.
I was like, I'll throw this one in there too, and they took that one. So I'm like, I wonder what else they got in some of these other topics for them to go for the backup.
Cool. Good luck with that.
Thanks.
It's a lot of effort to prepare for these things, right?
Some more than others. When I'm talking OCI stuff, I feel like that gets a little easier. When my main talk was going to be more preparation.
I tell you what happens when two people that are really fluent in some of this stuff try to collaborate on a talk really quickly. I wrote a deck for Phil Estes and I to present, and he knows this stuff so well that he kind of skimmed the deck. And then as you do, he's talking basically off the top of his head. And I'm like, oh, that's like 3 slides later. Oh no. Because that's what happens, right? You just start giving the time. I'm like, we should just do pictures next time.
I love doing that sheet.
Just like, I'm going to talk off the top of my head.
Here's my slide deck. I got one diagram.
Oh, I saw you do that at KubeCon, actually. You did. You just talked for 10 minutes to one slide. That was great. Good move.
In the past, I've had scenarios where I tried to stick to whatever the recorded demo was, and I'm invariably get ahead of myself. And that's with me making it, so I can't imagine if you're reading someone else's.
Pacing, demos. Just make it natural. Hey, we're just all here having fun at a round table with 1,000 people. No big deal. I had 6 sessions at KubeCon, so there was no way I was going to get prepped for all those and do decks for all of them. Nah.
No kidding. Just getting to them all was a challenge.
Exactly. Just getting there. Masks on and all that stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I need air. So, put a mask on. I don't like it very much. Do we have anything to discuss, Brandon? Do you know? Or?
I don't think we had anything on the agenda. I was going to go look for where I had submitted. Oh, it was a pull request, not an issue. That's why I can't find it. I was just going to mention that we do have, and I think, Mike, you're one of the people that chimed in over there. Yeah, you gave review. Let's see.
I hope it was a good review.
It's always good. Always good. I'll go ahead and get the note started here.
Okay.
Basically, I was going to mention that we do have the open issue out there for talking about authentication and authorization, and whether that should be a working group or something like that. So I don't think we're going to solve it here, but I just figured raise some attention.
I presumed that since there was a vote, that they would wait until they had gotten the new people in to make the decision to add. Otherwise, it's just before you leave, can you vote? Nah, it's on a brand new work group that somebody else is going to have to keep track of.
More than that, I think it's just good to get people looking at to chime in to say they might be interested or not. I figured any kind of voting is probably going to take a while because we're always slow, but
Not always.
usually,
It's got to get on the top agenda. So
yeah.
Speaking of voting, can I ask a random question that's not on the agenda? It's mostly
Sure.
just planning. I think we had set a target for January 30th. We're looking at the 1.1 version of the specs. And if there wasn't a huge issue, then we would look to releasing them. 1:30 is not a Thursday. Like should that morph back into like January 26th or like the following February day, or is that more like we'll bring it up at the 26th meeting and then votes will come in over email, and if we get there, then yay, we hit the 30th? Like what are people's thoughts there?
my thought on it, we exchanged some discussions at KubeCon about it, right? I think it would be nice to have a couple of clients using it and a couple of registries at minimum, and then see it snowball to at least, some small percentage, right? Without distribution doing it, are we sure we're gonna, right? And without Container D and maybe a couple others having the client-side code working, I know Derek's been working on it. Have we really exercised it enough to say, hey, we're good? If we go good early, we're likely to have to patch it. And if there's any risky changes that have to be changed, now we're sort of stuck because we've got some people that are expecting that version to also exist. And if there's a major change that has to be done or some kind of breaking change, God forbid, then we'd have to go to 1.2 right away. Right. My gut here is let's get a little more exercise on it. Try to push a little harder from the side of, we want to GA. When are we going to get a bunch of clients working and a few registries working, and like some of the base code that I know most of the registries are using. Brandon's in good shape, right? with a little bit, but I'm pretty sure we'd have to get somebody here from distribution, but I believe they're not ready yet.
Okay.
And maybe I've got some work going on with one of the maintainers on Helm, trying to get them to actually exercise it as well. So not just on the clients and on the registries, but actually a valid use case for somebody who was on ORS before that needs to migrate over if and when willing. So that would give you that pattern as well, I think. I'm being less aggressive than we could be, but that's just my vote, just my opinion. I can be swayed. It works both ways, right, Brandon? If you wait too long and nobody's moving, then what's their reason for moving forward, right?
Is this where we say Jason 3 times and see if he shows up?
Jason. There, we're just gonna try it out.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because the other thought I had was, in addition to distribution, we've also got the Go Container registry out there, and I think they've been working on getting a PR merge on that side as well. So there is effort from a lot of different directions. I think it's just a lot of people spread pretty thin right now.
Yeah.
Is it working in Scopio right now, in containers, Scopio?
I have not kept track of what they've been doing on their side.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we have a follow-on conversation? Because I was at the OCI summit at KubeCon, and I don't recall sort of changing this plan. I understand it. It's when we first said, well, let's pick a date, that was sort of the main concern, was like, will we have enough time for compliance? Will we have enough time for clients? But the flip side is, at least speaking, representing, here I represent Jesse Butler, but you all know I work on ECR, right? So ECR, we ship production features. That's what we ship. We don't have an option to do like developer preview. So we've been doing development alongside this
Okay.
entire time. And we're basically sitting behind some feature flags so that when we have a GA spec, we turn it on. The problem is that until then, we can't really turn it on. We can't risk sort of the data model changing based on spec changes. And then we have customers stranded with things that would be corrupt. So we're kind of like, we're the flip side of that coin, is like, if you want a very, very large registry to be part of this adoption, we can't do it until we have a spec.
Until okay, so and that goes back both ways. Would you be ready,
Jason?
Elastic Container Registry, if hey, Jason showed it, hey, man, would you be ready in ECR if we did go GA? I mean, that's like
Yes.
give
Yeah,
us the
exactly.
result. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's well, we've been pretty open about that. We've said that we've been doing development
Okay.
alongside this work.
So you wouldn't be far behind.
No, not at all.
And we
And
can
I-
run.
And I do not want to speak for Sajay, but I think they're right there with us.
Okay.
Yeah. See, he crinkled his nose and nodded very quickly. So that was good. Yeah, Jason, I did evoke your name 3 times and you showed up. So I think Brandon's theory is now completely proven. I think that's science. So you're here. Thanks.
That's how it works. John also pinged me on Slack and told me that everyone was saying my name.
That's cheating.
That's sorry to tell you how the magic works.
I-
What were we talking about?
We were talking about the timeline in terms of tagging the 1.1, and we were discussing all the different projects that were doing it. And the one that came to my mind was the Go Container Registry, because I think you have been working on getting the refers and subject support over there.
There is perpetually a half-done PR that I need to give more attention to get that done. I've told people I'll get that done by the end of the year, but my God, it's close. I would like to cut a 1.1. I would also like to make sure that everybody's concerns are, I think there are a number of concerns that have been raised that we should at least acknowledge and say, no, we're going to cut 1.1 anyway, like explicitly, this is not a thing we're doing. But otherwise, like, yeah, I guess my question to Jesse and Sajay's crinkled nose and slight nod is how willing are you for 1.1 to change, or the thing we would call 1.1 to change in slight ways before we cut a 1.1? Is that going to cause, a month more of work for you, a day more of work for you, 20 minutes more of work? If we like change the semantics of a thing, or like no longer required promoting the hoisting the annotations out of things into the refers, is that hard?
I think it's so hand wavy. I think it depends on what the change is. And Michael's here. I don't know if he's at his keyboard or not. He'd be better to answer that question specifically. I would say it depends. So
It depends. It's all just computer code, Jason.
Yeah, that doesn't
So-
make it good or bad. The specific thing is hoisting the annotations, right? I think that was the sort of most recent and largest ish sticking point. Is that, for example, something that would set you back 3 months, or is that something that would set you back, a week or a release, like, like one, I don't know how long Amazon's releases are, but like one release?
Yeah, I would say order of weeks, not months.
Okay. In that case, I would, and we're also like on the slow slide to the end of the year anyway. I would like to resolve the questions we have open about like hoisting annotations and the stuff we talked about, I think a couple weeks ago. Not even because I have an urgency to like answer those, but because the sooner we answer those, the sooner the clock starts on your, order of weeks before you can roll this out. So I don't want to, or if we all talk about it more and decide that we are going to do the thing that we already said we're going to do, then at least we've like, decided it. I just feel like there's a dangling open thread of like, hey, some folks have expressed some issues with the API as currently specified, and I don't want to rush a 1.1 out the door and lose that thread, right? Not rushing it sounds bad, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to cut it because we're ready to cut it, and let those threads dangle. Yeah.
I completely agree. And that's sort of why I did. It might have sounded hand wavy. I didn't mean it to, without progress on those threads. I don't think anybody should be thinking, oh yeah, well, let's just cut a spec, right? I think we want to work to, and that's kind of what I was asking is like, what's the actual date? What are we, because, Josh had this idea like, hey, let's draw a line in the sand just so we have a target. It doesn't mean we have to hit it, but it gives us something to work toward. Oh, that was me, Sajay. I was going to actually say, is it okay if I put everybody in the agenda? So like participants. So yeah, so I completely agree, Jason. I think we need to make sure that folks aren't super concerned about some of those threads. And if they're not, then maybe we time box some of those. Similar to how we did with the proposals in the working group. It's like, we can keep going forever, but as we go, right, as these weeks and months tick by, there's time that, client developers might be doing stuff, registries might be implementing, and other registries will be implemented and holding. And that is us, right? That's where we're at.
The time box tactic is useful for, I am explicitly not naming any names or any organizations that we may or may not be currently talking about right now. But sometimes like people sort of circle the solution, but never quite hit it and feel a little bad about, deciding to be close enough. And I think time boxing is useful to be like, listen, if we haven't come up with like serious concerns by December 15th, then we're cutting it, like, unless you can raise some serious concerns. I think that's a very useful like tactic that we have employed well in the past. Yep. Your point is good, right? I think like having a time box, but also knowing that it's not like there is a robot that will cut this at midnight. It's all humans here. We're all gonna like slip if we need to slip. That's a good point. I think the current state we are in is that some concerns have been raised, but none sort of loudly or consistently or pushbackily enough to be heard, to be like, iterated on and like, whatever their concerns allayed. And I would like to do that more. I would like to like give that more time and more oxygen to see those things out. So that we don't lose them. I like the nightmare scenario is we just cut it. We just say like, it's close enough, we cut it. And then 3 months later, we're like, oh, all of those concerns that were raised before vaguely have come true. The sky is falling, Cassandra was right. And we should have listened to them more. And I'd like to avoid that. I think as we all would. So I would like the actionable actual thing is for the people who have those concerns. John, I think you were one, to raise them more specifically and more loudly and push back more. I can't believe I'm asking John to complain, but that's a joke. Sorry, everyone. But let's complain more about those things so that we can hammer them out, either in terms of fixing them or saying we're not going to fix them. And then, as far as I know, those are all the remaining sort of things. Once they're gone, once they're accounted for, we cut. We're done. We pop the champagne. We have a big party, and then Amazon and Sajay get to like release their things and be cool.
I don't want to say that we won't release it if there is no GA. I'll be honest with that. But it would be good that customers don't have to think about whether parts of the service is GA or not. I think that's the statement that we want to make. And changing content that people have created is very difficult. So getting some amount of clarity would definitely help the conversation.
I think a good thing about the remaining concerns is, as far as I know, based on my latest understanding of what they were, it's not so much about what the user pushes as what they get back from the API when they push something, which means we can sort of fudge it, right? Like a client still can push the same manifests. They might just get a new response from the refers API if we decide not to hoist annotations or whatever. So that's at least a good thing about the shape of the open outstanding feedback. But yeah, I also, yeah, I don't want to put you in the situation where you launch something and then we, change something a bunch and we can say, oh, it's fine for us to change it because it wasn't GA yet. Like that's a real like trap, right? I don't want to put you into that situation or anybody. So yeah, I'd like to stabilize it. I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry, everyone. We should talk about the concerns that John and Derek, I think, was also having some concerns about that API.
I think for me, I'm not going to say it left the working group too early, but I think what I would like to see is more implementations of it. This, like OCI has never been this case of like, oh, it has to be GA before we can have implementations and users. Like we should, like everything should be perfectly validated, and GA is just like it's just like a stamp. Like it's nothing more than a stamp at that point. Like if there's anything wrong, like if GA has to happen before implementations, then implementation come back and say, hey, this isn't good, then I think that's not the way OCI is intended to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's smart. I think so. The important thing is not actually calling a thing GA for the purposes of Jesse and Sajay. The important thing is sort of a common expectation that there will be no major breaking changes to the API that we have laid out, right? That's not a label called GA. That's just sort of like, we pinky promise not to change everything and call everything a different thing now.
And I think that's more of a function of actual usage than anything else. Like the point is that these specs gain momentum to the point where there's no, like, nobody can come in and say, hey, you know what, I don't like this, and be like, well, too bad. Like we've already, we've made it through the working group. We have implementations of it. We have proof that it's working. Like if you have proof that says, no, this isn't working, then I think that shows something completely different.
Yeah. Brandon, you have your hand up. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I share the strong preference to seeing some implementations out there in the wild. So that would be helpful, just to have everybody comparing and trying. The close second to that is hearing from people that are running the major registry saying, we've implemented this, we're ready to just flip the switch. You've got a green light from us, just let us know when. So not quite as good as having it out in the wild and having actual implementations bang on it, but it is a close second for me. Jesse.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I completely agree. So this kind of harkens back to some of my past life experience. I fought in the Unix wars, kids. And, we had a lot of open standards that we did, and nobody shipped them early, right? We all did betas, and we all kind of came together and said, yeah, this is working for our customers. This isn't, let's fix it. And then we had a spec, then we launched a thing. And I think ECR is maybe the one that's closest to that, because we don't have a dev preview. I mean, I'll just hit that right on the head. Like, it is a very, very large registry in the world, but we really can't make it public. We do have an implementation. We have been, like I said, running alongside. For people that joined the call a little late, like we've been running alongside with implementation. So we are in that position of saying like, yeah, we're pretty close to ready. We really just need a way to not put our customers in a position of using something that then changes. And then, we have, artifacts that are abandoned or data that's corrupted, or we have to do this massive migration move. So I think that sort of, Jason, harkening back to what you were saying, I think that does align, right? If we're in a position to say, yeah, this isn't really going to change. It's open. We're still working on it. And I think that's the problem for me, is like, well, what if I do have a problem? Like, not me, but like, what if somebody comes along and does have a major problem with it, and they call out something that none of us thought of? And we say, oh, actually, we can't make that. We can't keep that pinky promise. And I think that's the risk that we would always be kind of coming up against, is saying, well, it could change. So yeah, I mean, I'm open, as a member here, to just do what we all think is the right thing. But I'm trying to also voice this, this position of like, we're more like from the olden days, right? We don't have a facility to say, well, let's give this. So like, even if we did a beta, it would be a private beta, We don't do public betas, right? So, you know, I am looking at things like Zot or distribution as saying like, well, these are things that we can actually get out there and get clients to implement against. What we won't have there is scale, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that John has pointed to is just the scale of something like, you know, registries at Azure or Google or AWS. So yeah, I guess, you know, I'm agreeing, but also kind of saying, I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah.
So I know one of the sticking points that we've come up with in the past, and I'll invoke John's ranting or John's complaining, which is the concern about the annotations. And so given there is concern raised about annotations, and I'll save John from even having to make the rant. From the registries that have implemented this already or clients are using already, do you need the annotations pre-filled out, or is that like a meh, don't need it, would be happy to see it go away? In terms of annotations in the refers API response. That's the most meh silence I've heard in a long time. Go ahead, John.
The PR that changes some words. I feel like in practice, the number of things attached to a subject is going to be on the order of like single digit. So I don't want to say like premature optimization to like hoist the annotations up, but the amount of like engineering work that I would have to do to support that versus like the amount of bandwidth or time or like latency saved by doing that versus just like embedding the entire thing in a descriptor via the data field seems like not worth it to me, because like even if we just return descriptors, not even having like artifact type or annotations, just descriptors, you're saving a huge cost of, okay, if I want to figure out like what references this, I have to list tags, and then like listing tags for certain repositories takes a very, very long time, right? Like we paginate several thousand things. That's very expensive to generate versus, okay, give me a list of things that reference this artifact. All right, I'll send 2 requests for that are very, very cheap. That seems much like I'm pushing back because I don't want to implement it. That's, I guess, selfish on my end, but also like I have philosophical objections to like the semantics of that. But those are like probably me justifying to myself why I don't want to implement it. But it's a lot of overhead to duplicate the annotations or to push the registry to have to like refetch annotations and parse stuff to generate this list. That's what I want to avoid. If everyone disagrees with me, then I'll probably just implement the spec incorrectly in the way I think it should be implemented. And if nobody uses GCP because of that, I'll be surprised. But like that, I feel like it's a reasonable middle ground.
I think the last time we really, I do agree with you, John. I think the last time we talked about it, the reasonable middle ground, I think we were circling was saying that registries could either hoist the annotations or include the entire manifest in the data field of the descriptor, and must do one or the other, right? Like registries may A, registries may B, registries must A or B. Was that an acceptable outcome for, like, then John, you would choose B, and potentially someone else would choose A, and clients would have to handle A and B?
No, I think that's too complicated. I think like the data field exists outside of the refers API, and so like clients should be able to handle that regardless. And like a registry might do both, but I mean, it doesn't make sense to like hoist annotations and do the data field, obviously. But like I feel like the data field is there for this purpose already, and it's like even more useful than just having annotations. And
Yeah.
I don't like having to like index an unbounded thing. Whereas like just the descriptor is pretty much a known size, right? Like a media type string can't be that large, integer can't be that large, and a digest is a fixed size. And so
Yeah.
that it's just much simpler than like, I don't know, encoding a bunch of stuff in annotations and then like using annotations for all the stuff. I just like it.
Do you have to index that large content? Because one of the thoughts that I was having was whether you can just generate the response and then update that generated response when you see something change. So the only thing you're indexing is, hey, there is a subject over here located in this location.
Yeah, I mean, I could denormalize this. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it's harder than not doing that. And like one of the things about the registry that is nice is that you could implement it in about 30 minutes, pretty trivially. And I feel like this part is more complicated, especially if you're like trying to be performant.
So to go around the room real quick, from the AWS side, when you've done some of the implementations on your part, were you facing a challenge trying to pull up the annotations, or did it not affect you on your design?
I don't know if I'd prefer Michael to respond to that. I don't know if he's there. Yeah, he's okay.
Sorry, I've been in and out. What was the question?
We're discussing the challenge of pulling up the annotations, whether that's an issue that might cause friction on people implementing this on major registries.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it definitely has the work to do that is more significant than not doing it. And causes a lot of, you sort of have to deal with like, okay, in most cases, the annotations are going to be a reasonable size, but it's possible that they could be really big. And so you have to either implement something that handles those cases separately, or just do something that is always going to work for the big cases, but is probably not going to be the best for the small cases.
How about from the ORA side? And maybe more specifically, the notation.
I can comment from the ACR side. It's pretty much the same what John said. There's significant amount of cost to index this, maintain a separate index for this one. I think we landed on the cost is high. Initially, we didn't want to do the annotations as well, but the clients found that without querying the annotations, it was not going to be useful, because I know that different implementations put in like thumbprints and other information into the annotations. And one thing I could probably ask is there a middle ground where if we don't return the annotations, we can hint that the annotations don't exist? So the PR currently that John has says that the descriptors may include the annotations. At least if we can deterministically know that there were no annotations, then you have to go fetch it. That might be a reasonable middle ground as well.
Yeah, I don't know a good way to differentiate between no descriptors and empty descriptor list, or no annotations and empty annotations.
And you could put an annotation on the index that says, hey, I
That-
put annotations on the descriptors. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the semantics
that's how
of
we,
this.
right? We did the filtering similarly, right? Like we filter by artifact type. I think that was Michael's proposal at that time. So if you have a similar way saying that, yes, annotations are not included, and you're at the mercy and you have to go pull everything back, or data field is not embedded, those behaviors might be a way to tell the clients, yes, we are not, they have to do something extra.
And we'd never have a mixed case where some people have half the descriptors with one way and half the descriptors different way. The whole response is going to be the same.
I was hoping that if we put the annotation at the referrers API at the bottom, similar to how we say that whether we filtered, then we can determine that there is no annotation in the referrers. So you have to go pull it.
Yeah,
that's a
I was
point.
going. I was saying when you do that, that applies to all the descriptors in the index, and so
yeah, I would keep it.
We would never mix and match within a single index and have half that would and half that wouldn't.
I'm hoping we can. Yeah, my vote would be for consistent, like all data looks the same rather than one piece of descriptor looks with annotations. That's my opinion.
The challenge comes when you have the clients doing the fallback implementation, and you'll have different clients uploading different entries.
I think that's fair.
So you thought it might have some use, and I'm going to pull on that client thread a little bit. You thought there might be some use over there, but you're still okay without having it.
I think if we can determine that there are no annotations, and we don't have to do, and we have to do the extra hop, then that's a reasonable compromise, right? My hope is not. I don't actually have a strong opinion whether the annotation should be there or not, because we did a lot of the heavy lifting right now, and we want to get feedback as to whether it's useful or not. I would say that getting deterministically being able to say that yes, annotations are included or not, similar to how we say whether it's filtered or not, would be a middle ground, and that would be important for clients to write this, because if you want to look at a thumbprint, you need to go pull back the descriptor and see if this subject or the signature or the SPOM has what more fields are there in that, right? So it would be good to kind of like, at least clients can see that, oh, the reference API didn't return the annotations. I need to go and now query one or two entities. Like, I agree with what John said. I don't see like too many entries being attached to an image. I mean, it will grow over time, but we'll get feedback over time. Hopefully Speckle reads 2.0 by then.
I feel like it's only a matter of time before people start attaching something every day, and you're looking for that timestamp to figure out when did this thing expire. It's not a if, it's a when. And the one that I'm most concerned about, we don't have representation here. I'm going to explicitly exclude TNN from that, which is Docker Hub, because my fear on Docker Hub is because they do the rate limiting on the manifest, that it'll be very trivial to push up an image that when someone tries to verify it, they would just instantly blow out their rate limit.
But to John's point, there's an option, right? They can choose to embed it if they want to.
If Docker Hub wants to, yeah. And assuming the fallback option either requires it or people are good about implementing it. Because once we say this is an option for the API, we're also saying it's an option for the client-side fallback implementation. If you have mixed clients, that gets even more complicated.
You're talking about the fallback index, right? That's clients are creating.
And so now someone can generate a fallback index that you query, and you instantly have to hit every 200 images, pull a bunch of manifests to find the one you're looking for.
One pull request, you hit your rate limit.
One image verification, and you instantly exceed your rate limit.
Yep.
And it would probably be malicious at that point, but it's still possible.
Yeah. I'd rather have it without annotations than hit my rate limit, but that's a different question. I see he had two changes that he wanted to make. One was to say should include an artifact type. I wasn't clear why. If the artifact type was set, it shouldn't. It may not be provided if it was set. John?
Yeah, I'm unhappy with artifact type
Okay.
Still, I wish it was better defined. I don't know that I understand what it is. I know like it is a string that may or may
It
not
literally
be.
says if present. So it's a user thing, right? The user wants to set the artifact. He has set it. Not, yeah.
The other thing is like the refers API right now is made a bunch of pragmatic decisions to punt on things that were hard to solve. And so like a bunch of things that would be nice to use the refers API for, like say figuring out what tags reference something or figuring out like what indexed image belongs to, are impossible. And the artifact type is meaningless in certain situations where you would want this API to work. Right now, it like only works based on the subject field, which is fine. But I wish it was more, right? I think in our like starting meetings with the refers API, we talked about like querying relationships between objects. And that's like a very abstract thing that could apply to a lot of situations. And what we ended up with is like querying for the subject field because, I mean, pragmatically, it's better to like have something that works for the use cases we really want to get out there than to like stall and try to solve garbage collection. But I don't know. I don't know that the artifact type is super useful because there have been a handful of examples where like the artifact type has changed because it was wrong and is arbitrary, and like what does it mean for like the media type, the artifact type, and the media type of the referred thing and the media type of the layer? Like what do you actually do with that as a client beyond just having a hard-coded list of things that you would expect to do? It feels kind of like a stumbling block as a concept, and so I don't want to like make it a requirement for the API implementation.
Okay.
So
So it's a general protest.
Yeah, I don't think it's GA-able in its current form.
We can always improve it from should to must later if that would if it turns out that nobody wants to use that field, right?
It depends. Like from one perspective, it's easy to go that way, and the other perspective, it's hard to go that way. Like as a client, going from should to must is nice, but from a registry, going from should to must is hard.
On this particular API or in general?
Yeah, in terms of a missing field, like if a missing field changes from should to must or must to should, it affects clients and servers differently.
Yeah. We're really just talking about the refers, but it sounds like you're also talking in general to those artifacts that are being pushed, that you don't think they should have their own unique type, or at least that it shouldn't be done with a new field. Rather, it maybe should have been done with the media type of the object itself.
I'm not sure. It feels like very strange to me because I still don't understand.
Well, you got two types. One's for the OCI reference and one's for, right?
Yeah, we have like an envelope type
to replace config, to explain what the blobs might be is the way I read it.
Yeah, it's confusing to me, and I think I am in the top 10 humans who like should understand this, I think. And so I don't know what to do with it as a client when I like come across an artifact type. Okay. And so I feel like we need to firm that up a little bit. I know leaving
more examples, more, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Before I'm like happy to commit to like, yeah, this is a must. This field is good. We should definitely like require this in the API.
I got you.
And you're looking at the refers response API, right? So you're saying you don't want to pull the artifact type up. So
I mean, again, it's slightly easier for me not to do that, so I'd rather not have to. But if that's a sticking point, you know, I can lose one of the arguments. That's fine.
So yeah, both of his arguments were made in the same pull request. So I was sort of guessing that they were related. It sounds like they are. Maybe more use cases to iron it out, and then maybe it would be okay if they're must, because he would see the use cases need that to happen, need it to be a must. And maybe it would be a different API entirely where it wasn't a must, right?
So thinking through the client scenario, extending the previous scenario we had where there might be something with 200 objects on there. They don't even have to be 200 signatures on the thing. You could be trying to verify the signature. There might be a single signature on that image. But if someone uploaded 200 cat pictures, you're going to pull down the manifest for all 200 cat pictures, potentially before you get to the signature manifest.
And it's unbounded. That's why I was proposing we put some kind of a resource limit, some kind of a bounding to that request. I don't know if you saw that proposal.
Bounding in what way? Like number refers you can have for a single image?
Right. Yeah. When I do the sketch for up to 4K or some, some limit to so you don't copy in an unlimited amount of in sizes of annotations.
So that covers annotations, but we're saying we don't have annotations. We don't have the artifact type. So all you get back when you say, give me all the refers to this image is a list of descriptors. And all it will say is that it's an artifact with this digest. Doesn't tell you what kind of artifact it is, doesn't tell you any of the metadata on it. So if someone has uploaded their Alpine image and they include a bunch of pictures of mountains and associate all those mountain pictures with the Alpine image as refers to it, and then there's one signature to it, you have to pull the manifest for the 100 or so Alpine, mountain pictures before you get to the signature.
Yeah, that doesn't work either. Yeah.
That's the scenario I'm throwing out. If we get rid of the artifact type, is that, you may have a scenario where there is only one other person that only one signature manifest in there, but you don't know which one it is without the artifact type.
Yeah.
I think that's basically exactly what I was going to ask is sort of how, if you're saying you're having trouble understanding what it's for, like how do you differentiate a signature from an SBOM if you're a client that only cares about one of them? Or do you think it just doesn't matter?
No, I mean, like I get that in the intention of that from like these two use cases, right? It's like, okay, this string means this thing, this string means the other thing. But if you're writing a client that doesn't know specifically about, say, like Notary V2 as a project, and you want to do something meaningful with an artifact type, or even when you're selecting an artifact type as like an author of, say, something, it's very confusing. Based on the spec, like it's very confusing as to what that string should be, to the point where I think the selections made thus far have been wrong, like almost exclusively, or like have changed multiple times.
And give an example of that. Like what?
I think like I think a Notary artifact type has changed, or is like proposed to be changed from something to cozy or something JWT.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to be changed, because I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Sure.
we disagreed on that. Like, I think both Michael and I, we like that just doesn't make any sense. So,
okay, sure, but like that example of like I think that would be a bad change, but I don't know. Like the people coming up with this field in the first place are like, oh, we should change it to this. It's like, okay, like what? My understanding of, oh, this is like an arbitrary string that like you choose as like a magic. It's basically a magic header, right, for your file type, right? But like,
but it shouldn't be magic, right? We were proposing that these be certified registered IANA types, right? Not that they would be ad hoc, fly by night, try to break the registry.
Right, but so okay, like in that case, there's another media type, which is like the blobs media type, and those are generally well understood like IANA types, right? And I'd say in the vast majority of cases, there's going to be one blob per artifact. And so do you put the like well-known type as the artifact type, or do you put like your interpretation of these bytes as the artifact type? And I don't know. It's the language in the spec is not good enough for someone coming to read it to understand what it means. And if that becomes better and everyone's happy with it, yeah, okay. But as it is, I hate artifact type.
We definitely have a hole in terms of we don't describe example usages and how people should be using it. So I 110% with you on that one. I've pushed for us to standardize it more, and I've gotten pushback saying no, this should be done by users and not OCI. And so I see both sides of that. I'll play that card.
Pros and cons. We shouldn't
I'll-
be defining them, but we should include a few that
Yeah.
we think are good examples.
Yeah. But I think there is a difference between saying we don't know what we should set it to and saying we should get rid of the field. Saying we don't know what we should set it to, we can at least defer that decision till later on and kind of figure out, okay, let's get some standards around this. To say we don't want the field in there, I think we're opening ourselves up some challenges, because I think there are two initial use cases we're going to see. One is that there's going to be clients pushing data that only that one client knows about, and they want to be able to filter on just their one bit of client data. And so they're going to put that on there as just the top level filter of only show me the stuff that belongs to my client, so that I don't have to look at anybody else's data. And they can kind of get their own little vision of this thing. And the other use case out there is going to be when we get into the standards. And so once you start pushing a standard SPDX SBOM, Cyclone DX SBOM in JSON format, when you start attaching that kind of stuff to an image, I think there's going to be a push outside of just the client pushing it to be the standards body that needs to talk about how they want to push the artifact. So I think we got two tiers of how this is going to be done, but I think each of them, I see some value in having this there, so that the clients that are implementing support for querying an SBOM can look to that list and say, okay, these are all the SBOMs, and don't have to look at anything else. Michael?
Yeah, I think maybe like taking a step back is the use case of sort of differentiating artifacts by the type that they are. Does that make sense to everybody? I guess, does that make sense to you, John?
Yeah, I get that use
And
case.
so, okay, so we agree that like the functionality is important. Is there some, like, should we use something? Are we saying we shouldn't use artifact type and instead we should use some more well-defined enum or something?
No. I would like to be able to implement this without having to parse out a bunch of information like this. I know, like, to create the relationship, you need to parse out the subject descriptor in the first place.
You're also
I'm
pulling
kinda
out the media type, right?
Like,
Yeah,
I think there were two reasons why we used this. We wanted to do something to allow people to differentiate it, and then the other part is that artifacts today, as they exist in OCI registries, when they're pushed as image manifests, already use this config media type field to overload, to give clients some hint about like what the artifact is. And so that's already in media type, and it's like already in use by, I'm sure you know this, but by like Helm and other folks. And so if this is, it seemed as though this would be the way to sort of move forward and solve that problem in a way that like tools have already kind of started doing without any advice from spec and standards folks.
Sajid.
Yeah, go for it.
I want to probably like agree with what John said, which is most artifacts that we're probably going to see is only going to have one blob, and there is a little bit of a confusion between the blob and the media type. But I also want to point out that the intention of the artifact type was for filtering. We had a clear discussion that we can't hoist all annotations and filter by annotations. So we make we go pragmatic and say we need one field, whether that's called artifact type or filtered field type or something like that is definitely something we can discuss. But to the point that people are already doing this in the config media type, and we have artifacts like Helm that have different values file and things like that that do compose. It was a good middle ground. But what is the, how can we make forward and go forward in such a way that clients cannot get everything that a subject refers? And so 1 degree of filtering is what I think the ask was. We don't want to go full blown all annotations. I think that's definitely not something that we can implement. But 1 pivot besides the digest to find out whether it's a signature, whether it's an SBOM, whether it's my magic client attaching something, right? So that was the only ask from a requirement perspective. So can we see have a middle ground somewhere?
And in terms of differentiating the blob media type from the artifact type, I think notation probably had the best example out there, which was that from the top level, the artifact type should probably say, hey, I'm a notation packet of data. Something's in here talking about this is something that a notation client can understand. And within that, you might have multiple different blob media types, or probably only 1 per, but it would say this one's going to be a JWT, this one's going to be a courtesy, some other format of how you've wrapped the individual signature can be on the blob. And so I think that top level one, though, is very useful for the client to know this is some data that I know how to parse if I read it. And so 1 field in there just says, this is notation. I know how to parse it. I'll read this one.
Probably something we should have, right? In the case where maybe there isn't an artifact type in the future, when we allow the refers API to return things beyond like only the subject field, it would be nice that, I guess maybe this is already language where like if there's not an artifact type, it doesn't need to be returned.
It does say, or the config
The
media
config media type. Because the only 2 things, we're only doing this for an image manifest or an artifact manifest. And so each one.
Maybe the answer here would be or some other, right?
So I suspect part of the challenge that you're getting at, John, is that you want to see this used for other stuff. And the other stuff you want to see it used on, this just doesn't fit your use cases in there. So if you want to look at what does this blob, where is this blob used in all the different places, what we've written here doesn't even remotely apply to what you're thinking of.
Yeah, and that's like part of why I'm like reluctant, but it's not as big a deal as the annotations thing. And so like if everyone is very, very adamant that this is important, then like I'm happy to lose this battle and like omit artifact type in the future when maybe there's not an applicable artifact type for a referring thing. But if there is one, then it should be there, right? Must? I don't know.
At least for right now, every artifact has the option of having that field, and every image does have that field.
Yeah.
And those are the only 2 things we're able to point to. If this was extended beyond this, that changes. But I think that's not so much a change of what the subject is used for, as a change of what the refers API is used for. And maybe it would just make sense to have a different API than refers for what you're thinking of.
Yeah, if you had a separate index that was feeding this particular field, I think that would be fine. And we could extend that here. I mean, the idea is to get these replies to come back and to have some kind of a switch field that we can filter on, as I just said.
Well, because what we've got right now is we've got the subject field that applies the refers API. If there was just a different backref API that you said, give me all the back references for this digest, and it spit back out a array of descriptors there, I think that would fit what John's looking for on his side.
I mean,
and it wouldn't conflict with everything we've been doing on the subject.
It'd be fairly easy to extend this for like at least 3 other purposes, right? Where you're saying like, I mean, it's the same API. It's just slightly different indexing stuff. But yeah, I'll modify this PR to include the subject as a must still, but I'm not happy about it. And maybe we'll see how that goes.
In terms of artifact type, it's like a must if the
if the artifact has the field. So if we are in a situation where that doesn't make sense, the spec as written already would like allow registries not to return artifact type.
Yeah, I was reading it. It's like the English is a little ambiguous in terms of grouping of antecedents, and so I didn't quite understand what.
Yeah, it didn't really say that. If that's what was meant, we probably need to amend again anyway. Right?
I agree. I think that
sounds
is
like John's on it. Yeah.
Let's update that. Because artifact manifests don't have to have an artifact type, and if they don't, then registries must not return an artifact type with that
Exactly.
descriptor.
Okay, I'll amend my PR, and then we can argue on the PR since we're at time.
Are we good on the annotations
lot.
too? You gonna do something on that as well, or
I'm not touching that.
not touching that with the 10-foot pole? Got it. All right. We'll let's split your PR in two then. See you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.